Senator Cornyn has specifically attacked you for missing votes in the U.S. House. How do you address that kind of attack coming from Senator Cornyn?
Well, sir, to be honest with you, it's the weakest attack that you could ever levy against a candidate. What a badge of honor to think that they are going to attack me and spend millions of dollars over missed votes. The people here in Texas aren't interested in the votes that you miss. They are far more interested in the votes that you take. And if you ask me, John Cornyn should have missed more votes, especially when he was co-authoring gun control legislation.
Ready to roll?
Yep.
All right.
Real Texan.
Why should this matter to real Texans? Welcome to this edition of Real Texans, where we talk to men and women of the Lone Star State who are doing great things to try to make Texas shine even brighter, and that sometimes includes visiting with those folks who hold or are seeking office. Wesley Hunt, thank you for joining this edition of Real Texans. Appreciate you being with us.
Thank you for having me on, sir. Greatly appreciate it.
Okay, so we're going to talk about, where you were raised. We'll probably talk about West Point. If it comes up, we'll talk about you being in Congress. But I have to ask you, this is a question I always put to guys that I meet who were Army aviators.
Yeah.
I have to understand, what was it that drew a young, impressionable Wesley Hunt to want to fly Apache helicopters?
That is a great question, sir. For those people that don't know, I come from a military family. So my dad's a retired lieutenant colonel in the military. My sister actually is a West Point graduate as well. She graduated West Point class of 93. So she served 23 years active duty, retired as a lieutenant colonel as well. I went to West Point. I graduated 2004 following my sister's footsteps. And imagine, you have your sister who's 10 years older than you that goes to West Point, and you see all the cool military stuff as a young, impressionable boy. You're like, oh yeah, sign me up. I want to do some of that cool Army stuff. And my brother is also a West Point graduate. He is 10 months my junior, so he graduated West Point a year after me, because of course, not to be outdone by his brother and his sister, he had to go as well. And so when you grow up in a family of military service and understand that there's 60 years worth of military service just in my immediate family, and you're visiting your sister at West Point and you're seeing presidents speak at her graduation, and you're like, oh my gosh, this is a place that was founded in 1802 that is a bastion of what it means to be a true American. I want to be a part of that as well. Now, I got to admit, sir, you asked why I chose to fly Apaches. It really is kind of simple. I'm a Texan born and raised. I spent my entire life growing up in Houston, Texas. I always tell people I was born in Houston. I was born and raised in Houston. My kids are born and raised in Houston, and I'm going to die in Houston. And one staple about Texas is this: air conditioning. Sir, we have a lot of air conditioning in Houston, Texas, and there are 4 military platforms to fly at that time. We could have chose the Chinook, the Black Hawk, the Kiowa Warrior, and the Apache helicopter. Now, the Apache is the one that has air conditioning. And so if I'm going to go into the desert, and if I'm going to fight in combat, and if I'm going to shoot at bad guys that are shooting at me, at the least, I want to be comfortable when I do it. But the great thing about the Apache is it's a weapons platform. It's missiles, guns. We are the guys that supported the ground unit. And at the end of the day, if we don't do our jobs, then people died. I flew 55 combat air missions in Baghdad. 55 times I said the Lord's Prayer to spare my life. And if in case I didn't make it, I knew that I was right with God. And it's that kind of courage that we have as people that serve in the military that guide me even to this very day. I got to tell you that my family's military service and my military service is something that I'm the most proud of.
Okay, so you served in the United States military. You mentioned you were born there in Houston. How did your family end up in Houston? Your dad was career Army, but we don't do a whole lot of Army things in Houston.
Yeah, that's a great question. So my dad was ROTC when he was in college, got out, was an active duty soldier, traveled around for a little while, and then eventually got out the military. And then he landed in a reserve unit in Houston, Texas. And that's where my brother and I were born. So my sister, who is the oldest of us, actually was born in Fort Sill, Oklahoma. Now, granted, she still claims to be a Texan because she knows better. But my brother and I, when they moved to Houston, my dad at that point was in the reserves. And my dad got to Houston, got to Texas, and realized that this is a place to raise his family. These are the kinds of values that he wants to see. And even though my mom and my dad were born and raised in New Orleans, Louisiana, when they got to Texas, sir, they never left.
They knew they were home at that point.
They knew they were home. Yes, sir.
All right. So unlike your dad and your sister, you separated out of the Army and went to Cornell. Tell me about what drove you, and then really kind of pursued a business option at that point. Why not stay in the Army? Why Cornell of all places?
My parents had a saying when we were growing up, and it was Jesus plus education equals success. You see, I grew up in a strong Southern Baptist home. Jesus Christ is my Lord and Savior, and I allow Jesus and allow my God to order my steps and guide me to where He wants me to be. I listen to God, and I realized that after spending time in Baghdad, doing 2 tours of duty in Saudi Arabia, He was guiding me more to the private sector. And then the education piece of this that my parents raised us all on was very important. That's why you have 3 West Pointers that come from one house. We grew up in an extraordinarily conservative home. You could imagine that. That's how you have 3 West Pointers that come out of one house. And the education piece of this was getting my advanced degree at Cornell University. And sometimes, sir, I joke with people when I say being at Cornell was also a combat deployment because Cornell is very liberal and it is very cold. So you could imagine a guy like me, a young conservative black Texan walking around Cornell University amongst the libs. They probably were like, I never saw a guy like this.
You must have been really popular.
They're like, how does this guy exist? But again, I'm just a proud Texan that believes in good, strong conservative values. So I didn't mind arguing with liberals. While I was there, I earned 3 master's degrees in 4 years. So I did a master's in business, a master's in public administration, and a master's of industrial and labor relations. And that's understanding how money works, how people works, and how policy works. And at that time, I didn't think that would guide me into politics. I was thinking about going into the private sector. But at the end of the day, it's the whispers of my parents growing up at a young age. Jesus plus education equals success. If you could combine those things, you could be a more well-rounded American. And when it comes time to serve this country again, you'll be more than prepared.
Okay, you escaped the Northeast, got your way back to Texas. You ran for Congress in 2020 unsuccessfully.
Yes.
I tend to believe that we learn a lot more from our failures than our successes.
Yes, sir.
Why did you lose that race? What did you take away from losing that race in 2020?
Sir, as a combat guy, Apache pilot guy, somebody that played football growing up, played a year at West Point, losing is something that's just, I can't stand it. I really hate losing. But you hit the nail on the head. You learn more from losing than you do from winning because it forces you to look back at the mistakes that were made, and it forces you to figure out, how bad do I want this? How hard am I going to continue to work moving forward? And it just made me a better person. It made me a better husband. It made me a better dad. It made me a far better politician. And what I learned during that time is this: you need to be your authentic self. And the next time you run, make sure you put together a group of people that are all in on you, that are true conservatives and don't listen to the swamp. You do it your way. And because I worked so hard the first time that I lost, keep in mind, when I ran, sir, I wasn't talking about losing. I wasn't worried about losing because I realized that this was God's message for me, was to get in this race, burn the boats, and you got to get off the boat to walk on water. And I remember the day after I lost, I looked up and I said to myself, looked at my wife and I said, now what are we going to do, honey? And then just like that, 1 year later, a new seat was drawn in the greater Houston area. That was a very conservative seat, a seat that President Trump would have won by 20 points. And keep in mind, I've been a MAGA, America First guy from when I first got into politics. And just like that, 1 year later, I find myself in the halls of Congress. And it didn't take me 2 years, it took me 4. And if God would have told me, hey, Wesley, you ain't going to get there in 2, it's going to take you 4, I probably wouldn't have listened. But now that I am here, I got to be my authentic self. That's why I have a Liberty score of 99%. 100%. That's why I was the first person in the country this last cycle to endorse President Trump. That's why I was an acolyte of President Trump, and I got to be one of his top surrogates. I got to travel with the president to Iowa multiple times, and I got to go to California and Nevada and Pennsylvania and Florida with him, and got to elect what I think is the best president that we have seen in my lifetime. And all of that got to happen because I lost. And so again, you don't do things because they're comfortable. People are wondering, why would you get in this race right now? Wesley, you've only been in Congress for 3 years. This is not about that. This is about term limits and giving my God and my country the best years of my life. Let the chips fall where they may. You learn all these things from losing, not from winning. And I thank God for that loss, because it made me a far better person.
Being in Congress, I think for most of us, definitionally 99.99999 repeating out percent of Americans, none of us are in Congress. There are 535 of you guys, House and Senate. It's easy for us to look at those of you who serve in Congress, and we see he's sitting this committee hearing, he's at this cocktail party, getting into that limo, that kind of thing. But there is a harm that comes to families, to the members, and then especially the families. How do you balance that? I know that the first time you and I met, you may not remember this because you look like you had been beaten about the head and shoulders with a 2x4. But you and your wife were on, and your 3 kids. All of you trying to get into a car with a car seat, and you're delayed flights. And I was delayed. I thought your car was my Uber. Everything. It was just an insane, like 1 o'clock in the morning.
Yes,
and all I could think then is, we both smiled, shook hands, you head off. All I think was, this is the part of politics no one talks about when they're asked to run for office.
Sir, last year I flew on 138 flights. 138 flights. And the reason why I did that, sir, is because you talk about the limos and the cocktail parties, sir. I don't participate in that. It is my job to come here, represent my district to the best of my ability, represent a very conservative district to the best of my ability, and then return home so that my children know who their father is and the people in my district know exactly who their congressman is. Again, part of the reason why I'm even running right now is because I want to take Texas to D.C., not the other way around. You see, I am not the person that hangs around here on weekends and hangs out as much as I possibly can. I want to get back and listen to the people in my district and represent us to the best of my ability. And you know what? With the rigmarole and everything that's going on, I got to tell you, sir, I'm not getting shot at. I'm not in combat. And when you experience those things, and when you think about my 14 classmates who passed that never had the opportunity to have 3 kids to get on the flight because they were killed before they were 25 years old, as hectic as my life might be, and as difficult as these times might seem, especially with a young family, at least I know that I get to serve for them because they are no longer here to serve for themselves. And it puts things in perspective. This is the 20-year anniversary of today, is the 20-year anniversary of one of my fallen classmates, and I'm seeing a lot of the tributes come up on social media. Imagine he died at 23 years old. We are 3 years away from the time in which he passed till now is when he died, when he was at 23 years old. I am constantly reminded as to what we have to do to continue to thank them for their service. And so when I have the ability to put all that into perspective, it makes me very happy that I'm giving my years and these very tough years to my country. And also, I want my children to wake up in the morning and I want them to see daddy leave and come home. And they see me on TV, they see me on Fox, they see dad working hard. And I want them to think to themselves at some point, my daddy did all of this so that we can have a more perfect union and a future for us. And also, sir, the United States Senate, United States House is not a retirement community. I'm not doing this for the rest of my life. It is my job to get in this job, do the best I can, work hard, fly back and forth, and tire myself out, and then have somebody else step into the breach and continue to lead moving forward. You're not going to see me do this for 20, 30, 40 years, because that is not what our founders intended for our constitutional republic.
I know that that veterans issues are important to you, but tell me about some of the other things that when you wake up in the morning and you think, here are the things I want to accomplish. What are the kind of what are the big buckets that those issues fall into for you?
Yes, it's first of all, we live in Texas, brother, and the most important industry to Texas is the energy and the oil and gas industry. And the one thing I got to tell you is the entire energy corridor actually resides in my congressional district. It is my job to protect the energy industry because Texas runs on it. Texas is the eighth largest economy, the eighth largest GDP in the entire world. We have a larger GDP than Russia. And why is that? Because we sit on the Permian Basin. So it is our job to ensure that we are net exporters of LNG, that we have energy dominance, that Texas understands that when you have low regulation, the federal government stays out of your way, we are able to produce more abundant energy, not just for this country, not just for our allies, but for the entire world. That's something that I get up and think about every single day. Another thing I think about is this. President Trump's agenda and the mandate that he was given about a year ago. Keep in mind, this man just won every single swing state. 87% of counties swung his way. President Trump won Texas by 15%. And as a guy that was the first person to endorse him, that agenda is what the American people voted for, and that is what they want. So when we're talking about border security, when we're talking about protecting our First and Second Amendment rights, we're talking about what it really means to be a Texan and to lead from the front. It means being an America First patriot, because that's exactly what the people voted for. And when I come up in here and I cast my vote and I have to go home and look at the people in my district in the face, especially up in Tomball, Spring, and Cypress area, the first thing to tell me is, hey, Wesley, thank you for having the president's back. And I get up every morning and realize that I work for the people in my district. I work for Texans, not the other way around. If I listen to them, you will see a very conservative voting record like I have. You will see an extraordinary liberty scores on votes that make sense. And you will continue to see that in the halls of the Senate, because that's exactly where my heart is. And it just so happens to be, I am a very conservative person myself. I get to live my heart and also get to live the people that voted for me to put me in office.
You have been criticized by, you're a member of Congress, you're criticized by a lot of people, but notably, before even entering this race, there was rumors that maybe Wesley Hunt would be throwing his hat into the ring to run for the U.S. Senate in 2026. And there was one group saying, Wesley Hunt is a puppet of Ken Paxton to go after John Cornyn. Another group saying, he's a puppet of John Cornyn to make life difficult for Ken Paxton. How did Wesley Hunt feel about being called a puppet by almost everyone?
I don't take too kindly to that, to be honest with you, because again, I'm somebody that's been shot at for this country. I'm somebody that's willing to die for my fellow Americans, and I've proven it. So at the end of the day, me being a puppet to anyone is just not going to, it's just not right. The only Geppetto or the only person that guides my life is God. At the end of the day, nobody else guides my life, and no one else can tell me what to do or how to do it. I operate what's in the best interest of our country. It's actually the reason why it took me 9 months to get into this race. And I can tell you for the past few weeks, John Cornyn has spent 7 figures hitting me in my own hometown. So I can assure you that John Cornyn does not want me in this race. For those people that think I'm trying to play spoiler, I'm not. I am just trying to give the people of Texas a true conservative option. Keep in mind, I was teasing getting in this race for months. I got this race 9 months after February, when Ken and John both got into this race. And I realized that right around the summertime, Ken was polling in the high 40s, 50s. And then I watched his numbers drop to about the mid 30s. When I saw that, I realized that maybe, just maybe, the people of Texas, the conservative people of Texas, may want another option. And I just want to give that to them. You see, sir, you're never going to hear me attack anybody on their personal business. I'm going to talk about the things that are most germane to my fellow Texans, and I want to stick to that. If they want to sling mud and hurl personal insults, that's fine. I'm going to talk about John Cornyn's record. I'm going to talk about him co-authoring gun control legislation. I'm going to talk about him being late to the game to endorse President Trump. I'm going to be talking about him granting amnesty 11 times. At the end of the day, we also know that Ken Paxton has been a strong conservative attorney general here in Texas. We pretty much know how he is going to vote. But you gotta watch the numbers and you gotta realize that some of his support has waned for various issues. I just want to give the people of Texas an option for somebody who can win the primary election, somebody that President Trump has endorsed 3 times. I was the first person to endorse President Trump in this country, and somebody who already is outperforming Ken and John in the general election as we live and breathe. If we give the primary voter that option, I believe that we will be that person. And that's why I got in this race. I was told that, Wesley, wait your turn. You're in your early 40s. You have plenty of time. Well, by God, if we listen to that kind of advice, this country sure wouldn't exist in the first place, because our founding fathers were in their 20s and 30s when they founded the greatest nation in the world. Again, you step up when you are called, you listen to our mighty Lord and Savior, and then you figure it out as you go along, but you got to get off the boat to walk on water. And it is my job to continue to serve the people of Texas.
Running for statewide office is, it's not just, harder than running for a district office. It's, it's multiple times. You're running for, the presidency of a European nation in terms of population, the kind of people you've got, able to meet.
Yeah.
A statewide campaign in Texas is equivalent to a national campaign in most parts of the world. How do you convince folks to even consider a Wesley? By definition, 37 out of 38 people in Texas haven't seen your name before, unless they happen to, catch a TV interview or something like that. You've never been on their ballot. How do you convince folks to even give you the time of day?
The beauty of what we've been able to do for the past few months is we've been able to raise our name ID statewide. I don't know, people were kind of wondering why we're running ads in West Texas and Dallas, back in March, April, and May. And quite frankly, we've actually done a pretty decent job on getting our name ID and raising our name ID. That's kind of the most difficult part of this, is because there's a lot of media markets and Texas is a massive state. And so getting your name out there as a United States congressman is something that's very difficult to do. But we've done a very good job of this. And we've been in this race now for just over 5 weeks. And before we even got in this race, we were polling at 20% before we got in. And what we've seen in data over the course of the past few weeks, we have climbed from 20% to about 26 or 27%. And we're actually tied with a 24-year incumbent. And John Cornyn has spent $45 million over the course of the past few weeks before the filing deadline in December. And we have seen him drop from 33% to 24, 25%. And the reason why that's happening is because gravity is not being very kind to him. And we realize that people are looking for an alternative. And by virtue of people finding out who I am, seeing the kind of leader that I want to be, understanding my family's sacrifice, and knowing that we need young leaders to carry on the mantle for the future, young America First leaders. There's the reason why our vice president is 41 years old. There's a reason why our Secretary of State is in his early 50s. There's a reason why our Secretary of War is 44 years old, because President Trump understands that his time here is finite. We have got to have people to carry forth the America First agenda in many, many years to come. And I think I'm the kind of person that fits that mold. And as somebody that has flown with the president and I have really gotten the pulse, not just on Texas, but across this entire country, I've realized that the time for me is now to give the people a choice of a young America First patriot.
Senator Cornyn has specifically attacked you for his characterization missing votes in the U.S. House. How do you answer that kind of charge? It kind of goes to, oh, he's not doing his job. It's, you're not punching the clock. Kind of the implication being that, you haven't been doing your job in the House. Why should you be promoted? How do you address that kind of attack coming from Senator Cornyn?
Well, sir, to be honest with you, it's the weakest attack that you could ever levy against a candidate. What a badge of honor to think that they are going to attack me and spend millions of dollars over missed votes. What we also know is that a big tranche of those votes were missed because my son was in the NICU when I first got into the halls of Congress. And then, of course, the president tapped me to be one of his top surrogates during the election. And so when the president says, Wesley, I need you on a flight to be in Iowa to speak on my behalf, or I need you to caucus for me in Iowa, which I caucus for him in Iowa as well, guess what? You're going to miss some votes there as well. So if you control for me trying to get President Trump elected and also the time that my son missed, guess what? I really haven't missed very many votes. And then I wanted to zero down to the votes that I've missed. Look, the people here in Texas aren't interested in the votes that you missed. They are far more interested in the votes that you take. And if you ask me, John Cornyn should have missed more votes, especially when he was co-authoring gun control legislation. So at the end of the day, people want to see my Liberty score on the votes that actually mattered. I mean, what are we in elementary school? Are we really going to care about who had perfect attendance? No. What we care about is who are going to be the defenders of liberty and the First and Second Amendment. John has failed in that regard. And so now the only thing that you have to go to is a elementary school tactic as to the reason why I have perfect attendance, because I make every cocktail party. And that guy, Wesley Hunt, with 3 kids under the age of 5 years old, is flying back and forth to ensure that he is in his district and his family knows his name. That's the reason why we need young people that do have young families and understand what every single everyday American is going through. And we are almost an octogenarian. You forgot what it was like to have a family, and that's why your voting record resembles what it does.
I want to close the loop quickly. Your son is doing well now, as evidenced by seeing you load him into the car. He's you mentioned being in NICU. He's turned out just fine at this point, it appears.
Yes, he is.
Okay.
You know what I'll tell you too, sir? At one point, that little boy was the most prayed after little boy in all of America. It gives me chills to think about when he was there. And I remember it got publicized when I had to fly back for the speaker vote, and the number of people, Democrats and Republicans, that tapped me on the shoulder and said, I'm praying for your little boy. And so when I watch these attacks on TV because Wesley missed votes, I am also remembered by how amazing it was to live in a country that still believes in a God, and God answered the prayers of those. And my little boy is now prospering. And I believe because it was the prayers of America.
Before we end our time here, again, you've run for office several times. You've been successful. Yeah. You haven't been successful. What kinds of questions, though, should folks like me, should voters, taxpayers, what sort of questions should we be asking Wesley Hunt and John Cornyn, Ken Paxton? What's the criteria that you think we should be using in judging who our next Republican nominee is for the U.S. Senate?
Are you an America First patriot? Do you believe in President Trump's agenda? Do you believe in nuking the filibuster? I do. What are you going to do when President Trump is gone? Are you going to talk about voting with President Trump 99% of the time while the boss is around? Or are you going to revert back to your 54% liberty score when President Trump is gone? Who is going to step into the fray and work hard enough to really defend the values of Texas? I am somebody that represents the great progress of this country. I always tell people this. My great-great-grandfather was born on a plantation, and 3 of his great-great-grandchildren went to West Point. 3 of us served in combat. At one point, my brother, sister, and I were all deployed in Iraq at the same time for a couple of months. This is a family that's willing to die for our country, and I represent in Houston a white majority district that President Trump would have won by 20 points, and I won by 25 points. I am literally being judged not by the color of my skin, but by the content of my character, because my fellow Texans don't care what you look like. We just want conservative leadership. The reason why a 24-year incumbent is in this position, the reason why a 24-year incumbent is polling in the 20s and his net favorability is +1, it's about to be negative, is because he forgot about the everyday American in Texas, and we Texans want to see a change. It's very, very simple. Look at our records. Look at our liberty scores. I don't care about the attendance record. What I care about is when it came time to having President Trump's back and the votes that actually mattered to our fellow Americans, where were you? Let me tell you something. John Cornyn has not seen a Ukraine bill that he didn't love. I have never voted in favor of sending not a dime to Ukraine. I was one of the guys that always supported President Trump in building his border wall, and John Cornyn said that it was arcane and not necessary. I will never support mass amnesty because I'm the person that's willing to die for every single American citizen to have the right to have free and fair elections, and being an American citizen means something. You don't just grant somebody amnesty after they broke the law. These are the kinds of things that people need to be asking themselves about. Who do they want to see representing them for the next 6, 12, or 18 years? And I will also end with this, sir. Look, I'm in my early 40s. I want to do this for a couple of terms and I want to move on. We need young, spirited, energetic leaders for the future. Our United States Senate and House is not a retirement community, and it's time for us to term limit those that have been around for decades.
Wesley Hunt, thank you for your service in the United States Army. Thanks for your service in Congress, and thank you for your time today.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you to our fantastic Real Texans audience for joining this edition. Look forward to seeing you next time.